Welcome back. Let's go ahead and pick up where we left off at. We're going to talk about the container workflow example. And this is what your developers are going to be doing repetitively on their laptop, let's say. They're going to be trying to build their application. So they're going to obviously need to have some type of source code development tools that they're using to create their application. Maybe I'm writing some HTML file with some JavaScript or PHP code, etc. I'm developing that there. Whatever platform I'm on, I'm going to need some type of dependencies. If I'm running PHP, I need a PHP runtime engine. I'm probably going to need something to serve it up. Maybe I'll use Nginx to actually be my web server to serve up the content. How I build this stuff and package it together as a developer is I'm going to create this thing called a Docker file or a build file. Now, I'm going to use whatever my container runtime platform is to actually build this image. And we're going to give you an example, and you're going to do a lab on it shortly. That image then needs to be stored somewhere. Images are going to be stored in some type of image repository. Initially, as a developer, it's just going to be locally on my laptop. Later, we're going to need to get these assets off my laptop and maybe into a pipeline or into your corporate image registry. So you're going to be, this is kind of where you could say the demarcation line is, where the developers are going to connect with us. They're going to push their image up to the corporate image registry, which we're going to build a little bit later. Now, locally, they have a local image repository right on their laptop. They're going to then need to test their code. So they've got a local container image engine on their laptop where they could go ahead and do a Docker run command, and that will actually pull the image and run their container so they can interact with it, test it, etc. All of this you're going to get to do in a lab shortly. And again, this is not going to be your job. The developers are doing this, but we want you to have an understanding of what the developers are doing and where they're going to intersect with our infrastructure to be able to get their images deployed inside our Kubernetes platform. When we talk about a container engine, again, the most popular one right now is Docker. It's been around the longest, and I believe, according to Gartner, it's got the largest singular market share versus any of the other container runtime engines. Any container runtime engine needs to be able to both build a container image and it needs to be able to run a container image. Now, how does it build it? Is it's going to take the source code and the dependencies that are defined in the build file and then go through the build process and spit out the container image. Then to be able to run it, it needs to be able to pull that container image and actually run that as a container. And again, you're going to get a chance to do this in the labs coming up, so you can see that. So we're going to pull down a generic pre-built for us Nginx image. We're going to actually do a Docker run it. We're going to open up our browser, connect to it, and say, yes, I see it. Then we're going to go ahead and we're going to build our own custom image so you can see what that looks like. So what is this building process? How do we instruct it to do specific things? Well, the build file, in our case, the Docker file, if we're using Docker as our runtime engine, its build file is simply a plain text file that's going to have a series of statements inside of it. So here I'm saying, start with a base image, an OS image of Ubuntu. I don't specify a version, so I'm using the latest one available right now when I built this. And then I'm saying, go ahead and install Nginx and PHP. Again, I'm not specifying a colon behind it in some version number, so I'm getting the latest one right now pulled down. Then it looks like I'm copying over my index.php file off of my laptop into this particular subdirectory, which is sitting inside of this OS. That's going to spit out for me a new container image. When you rip apart a container image, what are you going to see? Those three statements that we did in our Docker build file actually resulted in three different layers of our container. And guys, these layers are a lot like if you did a snapshot chain of a virtual machine, right? We're putting a cow file on top of another one on top of another one. So we first start with the based OS. In this case, this would be my Ubuntu that I specified back here. This is my Ubuntu. That's my first layer. Then I said do an apt-get and get nginx and PHP. There's my nginx. There's my PHP that's getting installed. There's my second layer. Then here's my index.php that I copied over here. So there's the 1, 2, and 3. Okay. There's different ways that you can interrogate a container image. Again, this is just meant to give you some basic foundational knowledge of containers. This is not the main area that we're going to focus on. So where do these images ultimately end up at? Well, we certainly don't want our production images sitting on a developer's laptop. We're going to need to set up a corporate image registry where our images are going to be stored at. And you're going to want to consider some advanced features inside that image registry. Now, Docker Hub is a very popular one. However, Docker Hub is a public image registry. We're probably not going to want to be pulling our production images, one, off the internet, and two, from something that's public. We're going to want some private stuff, which is our intellectual assets, stuff that we validated, and potentially we've signed it so that we know those bits haven't been mucked with. Now, this solution that we're going to be deploying includes Harbor. We'll talk more about Harbor later, but Harbor has advanced features depending on the version number and the deployment that you're using. It could, one, sign the image so that I know that the image is validated based upon a signature that was associated with it. So its bits haven't been, mucked with. Somebody hasn't put an alternate data stream inside there and are polluting our code. Secondly, things like vulnerability scanning. So I could take a look and say, hey, that version of PHP that this container is using has 20 CVEs, 2 of them rated high. Do I really want to deploy that right now? So we can control those types of things when we're setting up our image registry. Notice the image registry is also capable of holding multiple versions of our application. Maybe the developer said, hey, version 3 is ready to go. Let's try to deploy that. Maybe it crashes and burns, and we go, yeah, I need to fall back to image version 2. Okay? Those are some of the things you need to be thinking about in your image registry. We'll talk more about Harbor in a lesson to come. So I've been talking for quite a bit. Let's go ahead and get started with our labs. Now, to access our labs, I'm going to turn this over to a coworker of mine, Joe Cooper, who's going to walk you through how you're going to access your lab environment. Then I'm going to come back and I'm going to walk you through the 3 labs that we're going to try. So go ahead if you need to, take a break, but come on back and listen to my friend Joe Cooper walk you through how you're going to be able to access your lab environment. I'll see you soon.
Welcome everyone, this is Joe Cooper from VMware Education, and I'm here to walk you through the VMware Learning Zone lab environment for your courses. Hopefully doing this and watching this little walkthrough will make it a whole lot easier and answer a lot of your questions before they even come up about the VMware Learning Zone. Once you've enrolled in a course, you'll see the list of all of the different types of content that we have for your particular course. In this case, I'm looking at the vSphere Install, Configure, and Manage version 6.7 course, where there's some on-demand content, there's the lab, there's the assessment, and the evaluation. We're here to focus on the lab. So once you've logged into the VMware Learning Zone, and I'm going to assume that the fact that you have found this video tells me that you have logged in. Okay. It's at vmwarelearningzone.vmware.com. Okay. Hit the play button, and what'll pop up is the lab environment here. Now, it does take some time to get the labs fired up. At this point, the system is actually deploying an entire virtualized environment for you. So you should expect, depending on the course that you have enrolled in, for this to take a significant period of time in some cases. Okay? Like it says over here on the right-hand side where your entire lab manual is, this could take as long as 10 minutes. Okay? So make sure that you're patient with this, and when we come back, we'll walk you through the process of actually completing these labs and actually also getting some help when you need it. Well, that didn't take very long at all. Now, let's have a look at what we've got here. Notice that I'm in a browser here, and there's a bunch of stuff going on. I've got a bunch of applications, and I've got a desktop system right here in the middle pane, and it gives me some notes. Okay. You'll note that what we are looking at here is a host name called student-a-01. And for most of our courses, this is where you'll start by doing the labs. Okay. You'll notice a few things on here. On the left-hand side, we have a console, and this gives us access to all of the systems that make up your lab environment. In this case, I have a domain controller and access server. This also will typically act as your default gateway. For the vSphere Install, Configure, Manage version 6.7 course, I've got 2 ESXi hosts, I've got a vCenter server, and I've got the desktop that I'm working on right here, Student A01. And I can actually switch between the consoles on any of these systems. Notice when I click on this particular console, as it loads, it will actually be an ESXi host, and you can see that right now, this host is actually currently firing up. So again, be patient with this. Even though you've gained access to the system here, okay, student A01 is fired up and you're logged into this, the rest of the systems may be still currently starting. Okay, so this console gives you an idea as to whether they have finished starting and you're ready to begin doing labs. Let's head back over to student A01 and we'll collapse the console tab and we'll look at a few other things. I actually like to view this in a full screen mode. So let's go ahead and we can maximize this. And if you're really clever about it, you can also hide the ribbons and things like that in your own browser if you like, or you can always scroll up and down. Note here though, that if I'm scrolling up and down, that I don't necessarily have full access to the menu bars and things like this on the bottom of the screen. Okay. So be aware of this. You may actually want to move into, for example, you can exit full screen mode here. Let's do that. Exit maximized mode. Okay. You can place this in the center of the page if you like. Okay. There's lots of different things that you can do with this. Also, note that you can, on the right-hand side with your manual, notice, first of all, there's 123 steps or 123 pages in this particular manual. Okay. You can increase the font size. Okay, don't forget that you will have a scroller here. Okay, you can create a floating window for this that you can drag around if you like. You can change the pages using the arrows and things like that. Very nice. Lots of different ways to manipulate this window. Note that if you want to actually collapse this back to the side, just hit the X here and you can expand the manual again. Now, as you begin doing work in the labs, you will notice that as you go through these, you'll start a lab and that there will be a guide me video for each of these labs. So if you get stuck in any of these labs for any reason, don't try to, for example, open a console and reconfigure the entire environment. Okay. One of the things that you can definitely do is go through the guide me labs for each of these labs here. Okay. So you'll note you've got a number of these labs. All of them have a full guide me video, and it'll walk you through
In this lab, we're
the
going to
process
install
of
VMware
each
tools.
of the more
In your host
complex components of
Identified
the labs
by VMware
themselves.
ESXi, top left.
Now, if you're still stuck, there's always live help available for you during regular business hours. Okay. Don't forget, scroll up to the top of the screen and go ahead and find the help tab. There are a number of support options that are here. Okay. There are tips. You can download the user guide here for the VMware Learning Zone lab environment itself. Okay. Let's take a look at some of these support options. You can test your speed. If you're having trouble here at all with the environment, if it seems slow to you, you can head over to the speed test, where it actually allows you to start a test looking at all of the different components that make up the performance in your environment. Notice the speed of the learning zone, cloud speed, cloud latency, and VLP latency. So these are all different different components that make up the performance in your environment. You can also email education support at edulabssupport@vmware.com. Okay. And you can have a look at some of the troubleshooting FAQs. Now, when you are done with the course, okay, you have the ability to end the particular lab setup. You've got 30 days for most of our courses to complete the course and all of the labs, like it says here. Okay. You can exit the labs and return later, or you can hit the end button. Now, if you hit the end button, you are done with these labs. Hitting the end button says, I'm done with the labs. I'm done with the class. I've completed all my labs, right? Once you hit that end button, you cannot come back to these labs, even if you're within that 30-day period for which you have access to the class. Okay. Also note here that it says that in this case, I have not met the criteria for completing the class. You actually have to hit at least 50% of the entire lab environment in order to do this. So please keep that in mind. Here's an interesting trick. As you're going through the labs, the lab manual will give you things like credentials, or may have a series of commands that it asks you to type in, or set up a series of scripts. Okay. If you highlight text in the lab manual, you're able to drag that text into the console, where it'll actually fill that straight in for you. So you don't need to even worry about copying and pasting. A drag and drop does a great job, and then allows you to do things like log in to the vSphere environment. Oh, and one last thing. Don't forget, during normal business hours, you can chat with support. It's Inderg. Well, that does it for me. I hope you are really enjoying the online classes and you're having a good time with these labs, of course, you can always reach out to us if you need any further support. I thank you for your time and attention, and have a great time. Take care. Bye-bye.